In this video, I want to share with you a technique to help when you get stuck in your writing. I don't mean ordinary stuck, I mean that catastrophic variety. When you set sail, you start your first chapter, and you just go with the wind in your sails, and everything is going well, and you think, this is great. Maybe I was cut out to be a writer after all. And then what happens? You reach that part of the maritime chart that is blank, except for the words which the old cartographers would write, "Here be dragons." And the dragons are laughing. So what do? You turn it into an existential crisis. At least that's what I used to do. You say, oh God, what an act of presumption to think I could be a writer. I'm hopeless. I'm a loser. Real writers don't get stuck. Well, of course they get stuck, but they have a special technique which I'm going to teach you that helps them simply brush the matter aside, skirt round it. And it's not just writers who use this technique. All artists from all walks of life, Caravaggio, Leonardo da Vinci, Mozart, animators, everybody, it seems, except for new writers who don't know about it, and I didn't. So what do? They borrow from the future. So welcome to another installment in my series on how to write your novel using that most unlikely of writing implements, a round Oxford bus ticket. Now, for inspiration, we're taking the bus down to St. Giles, to the Eagle and Child pub, which is where Tolkien used to drink. And Tolkien will be providing a very useful example of what we're discussing here. But first, what do I mean we borrow from the future? Well, if you're writing and you reach a scene where you don't know what happens next and you can't think of something, you put what is known as a placeholder. You write a short description of the scene. The bishop seduces the maid here or something, and then you move on. You may have seen it done in another realm in graphic design, where sometimes they put the dummy text lorem ipsum in to denote what will come later. Or you might have heard about the famous Japanese animator Miyazaki, who, when he got stuck in his storyboard, would write, "Something magical goes here." Now, you might be a bit dubious about this, but I promise you that if you use this, if you master this technique, you'll never get stuck again, and also it will lead you to discover story riches that you otherwise would never have discovered. And here we are at the Eagle and Child pub. As you can see, it's under new ownership. It's being renovated. And it has, in keeping with our theme here, what appears to be an architectural placeholder. A wooden facade, temporary, a scribble that says, something great's going to come here, but we don't know what it is yet. Now you might think, how can that work? If I get stuck, then I'll still be stuck when I come back later. But you couldn't be more wrong if you think that, because the technique utilizes a powerful aspect of neuroscience called the Saigonic Effect, named after Bluma Saigonic, a Russian psychologist in the 1920s, who noticed that waiters could recall far better the details of an order that hadn't been paid for. It's to do with unfinished business. If something's not completed, the subconscious will carry on working on it, even while you're asleep. So if you utilize this, if you signpost to the subconscious that this bit is unfinished and put a placeholder, it will carry on working on it while you do other things, and then hand you the resolution in the form of inspiration when you're in the shower or doing similarly mundane tasks. I've lost count of the number of times this has worked for me. And even if that doesn't happen, you'll find if you go back to the work later, you'll be bristling with ideas. You'll be surprised how conscientious the subconscious is in this respect. I remember when I finished one of my novels and sent it to the publisher and it was being prepared for printing, I had a dream in which one of the characters from the novel appeared and told me there was a continuity error in chapter 17. I'd got her address wrong. And when I woke up, I remembered the dream and checked, and sure enough, she was right. Unfortunately, there was still time to correct the error. Now, there are a number of reasons why this works. The first is momentum. See, momentum is crucial for a writer. You need to keep going. You can't afford to slow down and stop and allow room for the doubts to creep in. It's a bit like those cartoon animals which run off the edge of a cliff and carry on running because they don't look down. And it also gives you flexibility. It allows a sort of emotional distance between you and the work. You can defer perfection to the future, you see. And this allows you to change your mind or discover new avenues of possibility. It was vital to the work of the great master painters Rubens and Rembrandt, because they would start with a crude underpainting and then build layer upon layer upon layer. And they're free to scrub away some of these layers. And these layers didn't so much dictate the final product, but furnished the artist with the possibilities. Now, Nabokov, the novelist, did the same. He wrote the Lolita on index cards out of sequence. He didn't know where he eventually was going to end up, but he had confidence in the process. You see, he knew that ultimately it would all cohere. Now, these changes of mind in art history are called pentimenti, from the Italian to repent or change your mind. And with X-rays, you can see them clearly. If you take an X-ray of the Mona Lisa, for example, you'll see that famous smile started out as a big grin with a tooth missing, like this. Okay, I'm exaggerating there, but it did start out quite different from the finished product, and Leonardo da Vinci reworked it over and over again. Now, you might say that he always knew what he had in mind for the final end product, and he just moved towards it. And that's possibly true, but equally I think it's possible that he wasn't quite sure what he wanted, and that haunting, enigmatic quality to the smile emerged in the successive layers. Tolkien provides many examples of this. Take the character of Aragorn from The Lord of the Rings, for example. Tall, stately, a king in an ancient lineage, reverent and filled with gravitas and a hint of melancholy. Well, that's not how he started. He started out as a hobbit called Trotter. In fact, he's so far from the end product that I don't think Tolkien had much idea who Aragorn was ultimately going to be. In fact, you can see the entire novel of The Hobbit as a form of placeholder for The Lord of the Rings. And in this respect, Tolkien did something that I think is rather ethically dubious. Naughty. I'll tell you about it after this short commercial break. Tolkien wrote The Hobbit as a children's story, a whimsical fairy tale, but it did so well the publisher asked for a sequel, and The Lord of the Rings became the sequel. But there's a problem, isn't there? Because the two are quite different in character. The Hobbit is whimsical, a sort of children's fairy tale, and The Lord of the Rings is epic, formal, ancient, mythic. Not the same at all. I mean, if you look at Gandalf, in The Hobbit, he's just a silly old magician, isn't he? The sort you might invite to a children's birthday party. And in the second, he's this almost Christ-like figure, and the elves go from playful woodland sprites to this ancient, austere race tinged with sorrow. So what did Tolkien do? He went back and changed The Hobbit after it was published. There are now two versions of The Hobbit, the 1937 and the 1951. In the first, Gollum, the character who plays Gollum, is quite amiable. He's honourable and wouldn't cheat in the riddle game. And the ring is really just a trinket which he uses to go fishing. Whereas in the next version, he's psychotically obsessed with the ring, and he tries to kill Bilbo. Now, I don't think you should be allowed to do that. Once you've published a book, the text becomes sacrosanct, doesn't it? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you found it helpful. And if you want to learn a bit more about how to deal with doubt, take a look at the video that should be on screen now. And don't forget to get hold of Gateway to Narnia.